The grocery bag handles dug into Clara Whitaker's wrist as she stepped quietly through the side door of her son's house. She always entered this way, never wanting to interrupt. The kitchen lights spilled across the hallway, warm and familiar, until she heard the voices. Just dump all 9 kids on her. She doesn't do anything anyway. Clara froze. For a second she thought she had misheard. Then she heard her daughter-in-law's laugh, light and polite, the kind people use when they agree but pretend they don't. She already paid for the food, Paige said. The least she can do is keep the kids upstairs. Clara's grip tightened. The receipt in her hand crinkled, the printed number bold at the bottom $1,963.75. She had not even told them she was covering the meal. She just wanted this Christmas to be smooth, peaceful, better than last year's tension. She thought that taking care of the catering would make everyone happy. Through the doorway she could see the edge of the kitchen counter, the flicker of candlelight on a half-unwrapped gift. Her son's voice came again, easy and amused. "You know she'll do it," Grant said. "She always does." Clara did not move. She did not breathe. The words hung in the air like a cold wind that had finally found a crack in the walls of her heart. Clara stepped backward, her shoes barely whispering against the tile. She slipped out through the same side door she had come in, closing it with the quiet care of someone used to disappearing. The winter air bit at her cheeks as she crossed the driveway. Her car sat under the porch light, dusted with the faintest trace of desert chill. She sank into the driver's seat and stared straight ahead, the receipt still trembling between her fingers. She didn't start the engine right away. There was no anger at first, just the heavy silence of realization. Grant wasn't cruel, not openly. He still called once a week, still hugged her at family dinners. But somewhere along the way, she had stopped being his mother and had become something else, the default helper, the reliable standby. Her mind wandered through the small kindnesses that had slowly turned into duties. When Paige had her minor surgery, Clara had stepped in without being asked. She handled the school pickups, cooked dinners, folded laundry. When Paige's sister Tessa had her 3rd baby, Clara watched the other 2 kids for the whole weekend. No payment, no sleep, just the unspoken rule that she would always say yes. The habit had grown roots. "Mom can handle it," Grant would say. "Mom doesn't mind." Over time, available became responsible. The line had blurred so slowly that Clara hadn't even noticed it fading. She turned the key at last. The engine clicked to life. The headlights caught a reflection in the window, calm, polite, a woman who looked like she was driving home, but in truth had no idea where she stood anymore. Clara laid the crumpled receipt on her kitchen counter, flattening it with both palms as if pressing the truth into paper. The total stared back at her, black ink sharp against white. She had wanted to make Christmas easier, to give her son's family one less thing to worry about. Instead, she had bought herself a reminder of where she stood. Her eyes wandered across the kitchen. The decorations were still in their box on the table, waiting for her to hang them. A stack of unmailed cards leaned against the fruit bowl, each signed with careful handwriting, "Love, Mom." For years, she had done everything right, everything expected. And yet somehow her effort had turned invisible. Memories rose one by one, quiet and persistent. Last Thanksgiving, she had arrived early to help cook and stayed late to clean. Grant's in-laws had taken the guest room upstairs and Clara had been offered the pull-out sofa in the basement. No pillow, no sheet, just a folded blanket and an apology that dissolved as quickly as it came. At Grant's wedding, she had ironed his shirt, tied ribbons for the centerpieces, smiled through the long day. When the photos were posted online, she wasn't in a single one. "You must have stepped out," Grant said. She had only to wipe spilled wine off the floor. Now, standing alone in her kitchen, she whispered to herself, when did helping turn into obligation? The question lingered, unanswered, in the quiet hum of the refrigerator. The next morning, Clara sat at her kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee and the back of an old receipt. She drew 2 columns across it with a pen, pressing hard enough for the ink to nearly bleed through. On the left she wrote given, on the right received. She began listing without thinking. Rides to the doctor. School pickups. Holiday cooking. Babysitting. Loaning money. Hosting birthdays. Covering emergencies. The list stretched long, slanting sideways as her handwriting sped up. She had given so much that the paper almost wasn't wide enough to hold it. When she looked at the right side, the received column, She hesitated. Her pen hovered for a full minute before she drew a single dash. That was all she could think of. A single mark in a blank space. She leaned back, staring at the imbalance. Maybe she was being petty, she thought. Maybe she had taken Grant's words out of context, but the longer she stared, the clearer the truth became. She wasn't upset because of one careless sentence. She was grieving a pattern she had let build for years. A thought flickered through her mind. If a friend had asked her to do half of what her family did, she would have said no. Family, though, had always been the exception. Family meant giving without counting. But now, for the first time, Clara was counting, and the numbers told a story she could no longer ignore. That night, Clara pulled a clean sheet of paper from her drawer. At the top she wrote 2 new headings, "What they assume and what I want." The kitchen clock ticked softly in the background as she started filling in the first column. They assume I don't mind babysitting. They assume I have nothing better to do. They assume I'll always pay if it helps them. They assume my time isn't valuable. They assume I don't need rest. When she switched to the second column, her hand slowed. I want to be invited, not assigned. I want to sit at the table, not serve it. I want to enjoy my family, not manage it. I want to be seen, not used. I want peace. She looked at both sides of the page. It wasn't anger that filled her chest this time, it was clarity. For years she had waited for someone to notice her exhaustion, to offer what she freely gave. But people rarely recognize boundaries you never set. The truth felt simple, almost embarrassingly so. She had trained everyone to treat her this way. Every quiet yes, every tired smile, every "it's fine, I'll handle it" had built the life she now wanted to escape. Clara read her list again, tracing each word with her finger. Then she whispered, I can help if I want to, not because I have to. It wasn't a declaration, it was a beginning. By morning, Clara knew what she needed to do. She dialed the catering company, her fingers steady on each number. A cheerful woman answered, her voice bright and professional. Whitaker residence. Oh yes, the order for the 25th. Was there an issue? Clara took a slow breath. No issue, she said. I just need to cancel everything. There was a pause on the line, then the sound of keys clicking. We can process a partial refund, the woman said kindly. You'll receive about $1,000 back after the deposit. Clara thanked her and hung up before she could change her mind. For a long moment she sat at the table listening to the quiet hum of her refrigerator. The world didn't fall apart. The sky didn't darken. Nothing happened, and yet, everything had shifted. It felt like unclenching a fist that had been tight for years. Afterward, she pulled a single sheet of stationery from a drawer and wrote one sentence in careful cursive. No one else defines your worth. She folded it neatly, slid it into an envelope, and addressed it to herself. When she dropped it into the mailbox outside, she smiled faintly at how strange and small the act seemed and how freeing it felt. Inside, her kitchen looked the same, but the air had changed. The space felt wider somehow, as if she had opened a window that had been painted shut for too long. That afternoon, Clara pulled her small gray suitcase from the closet. Not the big one she used for family trips, just enough space for jeans, a sweater, her favorite mug, and the paperback she never finished. She opened her laptop and booked a room at a quiet roadside motel near Las Cruces, halfway to Valerie Monroe's ranch. She left the receipt on the counter and set her phone face down beside it. For a moment she considered leaving a note, but she didn't owe explanations anymore. Instead, she turned the phone completely off, no vibration, no silent mode, just off. The stillness that followed felt like exhaling for the first time in years. As she drove, the desert unfolded in wide stretches of gold and rust. The road shimmered under the low winter sun, and with each passing mile she felt something inside her untangle. She didn't turn on music, she didn't call anyone, she just drove. Somewhere near the state line, a memory surfaced. Grant at 8 years old, carrying a chipped mug of tea to her bedside, proud of his independence. Careful, it's hot, he'd whispered. That boy had once looked up to her. Somewhere along the way he had started looking past her. Clara smiled softly, not with bitterness but with understanding. Love could stay, even when patterns had to end. The sky ahead stretched open, pale and endless, as if it were waiting just for her. By the time Clara reached Valerie Monroe's ranch, the sun had started to dip low behind the desert hills. The porch light glowed like a small welcome home. Valerie opened the door with her same easy smile, her gray hair pulled into a loose braid. You made it, she said, and that was all. Inside, the air smelled of cinnamon and roasted chilies. A few neighbors were already gathered in the kitchen, passing around a tray of cinnamon rolls still warm from the oven. Someone turned on an old radio that hummed softly from the windowsill. There was laughter, not loud or forced, but easy, the kind that fills a room without taking up space. Valerie poured Clara a cup of coffee and led her out to the porch. The wood was warm under their feet, even in the chill air. They sat together, watching the horizon fade from orange to violet. No one asked about her family. No one expected her to explain herself. The quiet was kind, not heavy. When dinner came, there were mismatched plates and folded paper crowns from a neighbor's drawer. They ate slowly, trading stories about burnt turkeys and failed cookie batches. Every laugh felt like a stitch repairing something torn. Clara realized then that peace didn't need to be loud or dramatic. It could be as simple as being handed a chair, not a chore. The next morning, Christmas Eve sunlight spilled across the porch. Clara's phone sat face down on the side table, silent for the first time in days. When it finally buzzed, she already knew whose name would appear on the screen. Grant. She stared at it for 3 full rings before she picked up. His voice came sharp, already impatient. "Mom, where are you?" Clara took a sip of coffee before answering. "Not at home," she said calmly, "and not with you." "What does that mean?" he demanded. "It means I heard you," she replied. "I was standing in the hallway when you told Paige to dump the kids on me. I heard every word." There was a pause, long and unsteady. She could almost hear him searching for an excuse. "You didn't ask me, Grant. You assigned me. You planned Christmas like I was the hired help, not your mother." He tried to speak, but she kept going. "You didn't invite me to be part of it, you just assumed I'd make it happen." Then came his half-hearted attempt to patch things. "You're still coming, right? You're just upset." "No," she said quietly. "I canceled the catering. The food, the gifts, all of it. I paid for it, and now I've taken it back." "Mom, you're being dramatic." Clara smiled faintly. "No, Grant, I'm being honest. There's a difference." She ended the call, turned off the phone again, and set it beside her coffee cup. Valerie didn't ask a thing. She just passed her another cinnamon roll, and they sat together in the easy quiet. 4 days later, on the morning of December 29th, a sharp knock echoed through Clara's living room. Not a polite knock, a demanding one. She already knew who it was before she reached the door. Grant stood in front, his jaw tight, eyes narrowed. Behind him, Paige crossed her arms, and next to her stood Tessa, looking restless, as if she had rehearsed a speech on the drive over. Clara opened the door but didn't step aside right away. "Come in," she said evenly. They walked past her, not waiting for permission. "You embarrassed us," Paige started. The food never showed up. People asked questions. Tessa jumped in next. "Do you have any idea how hard we had to scramble? Nolan and I went to 3 stores." Grant folded his arms. "You ruined Christmas, Mom. Everyone was counting on you." Clara stood near the counter, her hands resting on its edge. She didn't raise her voice. "I didn't ruin anything. I just stepped out of a role I never agreed to play." Grant frowned. "What does that even mean?" "It means I'm not your staff," she said, steady now. "I'm not the babysitter, the invisible cook, the one who fixes everything behind the scenes. I'm your mother, not your employee." Paige scoffed. "So you punish everyone because you're tired?" Clara met her eyes. "No, I chose not to be used. That's not punishment, that's protection." The room fell silent. Paige's expression hardened, Tessa shook her head, and Grant looked lost, like something familiar had slipped out of reach. Clara walked to the door and opened it. "If you came for an apology," she said softly, "you're not getting one." They hesitated, expecting her to cave. She didn't. They stepped outside, and she closed the door gently behind them. The lock clicked once, firm but quiet, sealing the moment like a full stop. 2 months passed, and the world did not collapse. The holidays faded into memory, and January slipped by like a quiet breath. Clara didn't send New Year cards, and none arrived for her either. The absence didn't ache the way she thought it would. Most Saturdays now, she walked to the public library 3 blocks away. There was a small reading nook by the southwest window where sunlight poured in through the glass. She would bring a thermos of coffee and a book from the new arrival shelf. Sometimes she read, sometimes she just watched the light move across the floor. On Thursdays, she volunteered at a small community clinic front desk work, clipboards, and smiles for strangers who didn't expect anything more. It felt simple and kind, never heavy. Her phone stayed quiet. Grant called twice in January, both times late at night. No voicemail, just missed calls. She didn't return them, but she didn't block him either. It wasn't about anger anymore. She just didn't feel the need to chase. At home, she cooked when she felt like it. She kept fresh flowers on the table, even if they wilted too soon. She said no when she meant no, and yes when she truly wanted to. No one asked for weekend help now. The silence that once felt like punishment had turned into peace. It was space she had earned, a room in her life that finally belonged only to her. Sometimes she would catch herself reaching for her phone out of habit. Then she'd stop, smile faintly, and let her hand fall away. Most of the time she didn't miss a thing. One quiet morning in late February, Clara sat by her kitchen window with a notebook open in front of her. The sunlight fell in soft stripes across the page as she began to write what she had learned. Love needs edges, she wrote first. Without them, love turns into labor that no one sees. Next line, silence is an answer. When thank you never comes, believe the pattern. And then, a seed is not the same as a chore. Ask which one you're being given. She closed the notebook and looked around her small kitchen. It wasn't grand, but it was hers. Every mug, every folded towel, every breath of quiet belonged to her again. For the first time in years, she wasn't filling a role. She was living a life. The phone on the counter buzzed once. A text from Grant, "Hope you're okay." She didn't reply, but she smiled softly. Maybe one day she would, maybe she wouldn't. Either way, she was fine. As the clock ticked gently behind her, Clara whispered the sentence that had started her change. Choosing peace is not revenge. It's repair. Then she looked toward the camera of her own mind, as if speaking to anyone who might understand. If you've spent years saying yes because you thought that's what love meant, try saying one honest no. Mail yourself a note the day you choose peace. She reached for her coffee, exhaled, and let the silence settle. Warm, steady, earned. Like this story? Share it, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of quiet strength and second chances.